Well, hello again. It's a little earlier than last night. I'm gonna give this a try because, well, my fans are calling. First, I need to tell you that when the book was chapter 1, January 2010, uh, I was married. um, Pregnant, but I was definitely married, and therefore I had been engaged. So my apologies to, I guess, my husband and whomever else, because I don't know, I just forgot that 2009 was a big year for me. Anyway, so we're heading into chapter 2. Today I speak to you from Bobby Lynn's room. It's the only quiet place in the house at this time. Anyway, that's her up there. There. Haha. Anyway, yeah. All right, so this is, we're on chapter 2. This is titled, all those Chinese, Miley. I'm just going to say Miley. Okay. So it seems as though we're going to learn about the backstories of these characters. Chapter 1, we learned a lot about Sister Evelyn. Now we're going to learn about Miley. Okay. Oh, and this is from her point of view, because I see when I was a girl. So, first person. When I was a girl, my father played paper dolls with me every evening after work, and when he cut out the dresses and hats for my little paper girls, he worked cautiously around their edges so they'd be just right. His eyebrows bunched together like two hairy caterpillars. Like mine right now because of, well, can't get to the lady to do my eyebrows. Anyway, his scissors closed slowly, millimeter by meticulous millimeter. He worked like he wasn't a New York taxi driver who shared his cab with his terrible older brother and two other Russian men in our apartment building who smelled of gasoline and borscht. That must be Russian. He worked like this was his living. He was a paper tailor and a good one. I was careless, too eager to get past the tedious preparation and down to the business of playing. I sliced through an abdomen without looking or cut off a sleeve, and when I realized what I'd done, I'd collapse against the kitchen table and wail. This was before I learned sharing my emotions was a disadvantage to survival. Aha, that's called a foreshadowing. Zolotz, I don't know what that word is. Zolotse. He's a Russian. So, I don't know. Zolotz, my father would say, his hand on my back. My gold, don't despair. You've done nothing that can't be undone. All of that, you can say, with Zolasse. With these reassurances in mind, I'd push myself up from the table to watch him repair my mistake. Because he was not just a paper tailor, he was also a paper surgeon. He'd mend the wounds with precisely measured bits of Scotch tape bound to the backs of the dresses so that the stitching would be invisible. And when he was finished, they looked as good as new. He was a paper miracle worker. I didn't like paper dolls. My friends had color forms. I was jealous. Never had them. My mother watched us from the stove, where she prepared food to satisfy both of their palates. For her, hot and sour soup, whose chili oil made my father's eyes water just from sharing the same room as its powerful essence, and for him, Olivier salad, a far blander mound of hard-boiled eggs, peas and potatoes slathered in mayonnaise. Gross. Then there was always a third dish, one they could both sample, sautéed carrots and beets coated in soy paste. Who would do that to carrots? I still don't know if this is a traditional Chinese dish that happened to incorporate elements of my father's Russian heritage, or if my mother invented it after she listed herself in a catalog and agreed to marry a man she'd only seen in a photograph. Oh, a mail-away bride. That's a real thing. Well, maybe not, because this is a fictional story. She arrived in the United States 2 years before I was born and was relieved and grateful to discover that she could love the stranger who would be her husband. Grateful to be a wife in America, that her darling yielded positive results. Grateful enough to cook and eat beets. You spoil her. You fix her mistake over and over. She'll never learn. She'll never do well herself. You is right, my love. Lyubova moya. That's my Russian, my father answered. Of course you was right. But he was my paper friend. He continued to fix my mistakes over and over again until the day he died. Figures. It's a Disney movie. Uncle Nikita moved from his apartment into ours the day after my father's funeral. Uh-oh. I was 14 then. Ivan would very not want you alone, he said. I watch over you, keep you safe, for my brother. He slept on the couch that night, and the night after that. Good. When he was still in our living room a week later, drinking Moskovskaya out of my mother's porcelain teacups, she said, Nikita, you've been so good to us, but you don't have to stay here no more. We're fine. I have Mei Li and she have me. We do okay. I'm using a New York and Chinese accent for my reading, apparently. His stare didn't waver from the television. Oh, his stare. His stare didn't waver from the television where the American soccer team struggled against South Africa. Nikita loved to see Americans lose. Welcome to our country. His voice was gruff, almost threatening, when he said, It isn't right to leave women on their own. My mother gripped her hands at her waist and smiled in a way that scared me. We be fine. Mei Li is a smart girl, and I am strong. We take care of each other, and you live close. If we need anything, we find you in no time. But you can go home. Don't be uncomfortable just for us. His gaze slid toward her. The darkness in his eyes made me pull my pencil down. Listen, Fan, you do not sound so hospitable. My mother chuckled and shook her head. Oh no, you must understand. Nikita shot to his feet and whacked my mother upside the head. It wasn't forceful, but the sudden cruelty of it still caused me to gasp. Do not you talk back to me. If I say you is inhospitable, you is inhospitable, he said. And then he returned to the game as if nothing had happened. He's an asshole. Violence in our home was so strange, neither my mother nor I knew how to react. I couldn't see her face from where she was standing, but her body was rigid. After a few frozen moments, she turned on her heels, walked down the hall, and closed her bedroom door behind her. The announcer's voice hummed in the background, but I couldn't focus on his words. I could hardly even breathe. Nikita didn't look back at me. He sloshed another helping of Moskovskaya. I'm going to Google that. Moskovskaya. I'm sure it's vodka, right? Into my mother's teacup, one of the few items she'd brought with her from China. Oh, actual China, a China teacup. And when the American team scored a goal, he screamed something in Russian. Otvali mulayad, and hurled the cup against the wall, where it smashed. Oh my God, what an asshole. As I brushed my teeth that night, he walked down the hall, oh God, and into my mother's room. The brush stilled in my hand. I caught a glimpse of her sitting on her bed, a photo album open in her lap. When he appeared, her eyes widened in surprise and perhaps in fear, but she said nothing to stop him. He closed the door. Well, it was either the mother or the girl, right? I bet you the mom's just protecting her, but Jesus, it's so gross. Okay, instead of going to bed, I gathered the shards of my mother's teacup and laid them on the kitchen table. As Nikita's grunts and my mother's whimpers drifted through the walls, I hummed to myself and tried to glue her precious keepsake back together. But this time what was done could not be undone. It had been broken into too many pieces. Oh, God. If I ever have a daughter, I will give her a male name. Something like This is all Chinese. Zilong, meaning like a dragon. Boys get names like that in my mother's country. Jinjun, building the army. Li, thunder. Huajin, fire metal. Yingji, brave and heroic. Girls are too often defined by their grace, their docility. Bazai, dainty and loving. Luli, dewy jasmine. Renzing, Renching, I think. Renching. Benevolent fragrance. My name, what did we say we were going to call her? Miley? I think Miley. It's MEI-LI, so I don't know. I'm going to go with Miley. Means beautiful. What good did beauty ever do me? It took a year from that first awful night for Uncle Nikita to come into my bedroom. Perhaps I should be grateful it took him that long. My mother tugged on his arm. She asked him to come back to her room, but she knew she couldn't stop him. Her name is Fan, which means orchid. A sudden change in weather will cause an orchid's petal to drop and will wither its stem. Although she was strong and courageous, having traveled to a country with a foreign tongue in order to marry a man she'd never met, my uncle was stronger. Nikita is a Russian name meaning supreme, unbeatable. Like Nikita Khrushchev. My uncle wrapped his thick hands around her neck and squeezed until her eyes bulged. He wanted both of us to know he was capable of killing us. We only lived because he let us. He was the god of our universe. Or maybe he wanted my mother and me to understand that if one of us left, if one of us so much as said a word against him, he could kill the other. That was his leverage. My mother sputtered. Her fingers clawed at his unrelentless noose. Stop! Do whatever you want to me. Just stop, I cried. And he did what he wanted. He was going to anyway. He alternated between my mother and me for the next 2 years. One day, when my mother was sick with the stomach flu and Nikita wanted beef stroganoff for dinner, I brought home the wrong cut of meat. He walked me down to the corner grocery store to show me exactly how stupid I'd been. That's where I first met Sister Evelyn. She stole glances at Uncle Nikita and me, and I don't know how she understood, but when our eyes met, she recognized something in me. I felt it. She saw me in a way nobody else had. Not my neighbors, not my teachers, not my Aunt Antonina. Antonina. Or perhaps those people did see that thing in me, that broken thing, but they chose to look away because it was easier and safer. Sister Evelyn didn't look away, and neither did I. I saw something in her, too. Yay, she's meeting Sister Evelyn. Get rid of this Nikita guy. He's bad news. As we approached the counter with a package of cube steak and a bottle of Nikita's Moskovskaya, I'm getting better at that, aren't I? Moskovskaya. She appeared with a cart full of bagged groceries, wearing an oversized Mets sweatshirt. Oh, she's a Mets fan. Excuse me, she said sweetly to Nikita. I couldn't get my shopping cart over the step in front of the door, so I left it out on the sidewalk. And now I need to transfer all of these heavy bags. You're big and strong. Would you help a feeble old woman? Nice, sister. She's good. As soon as Nikita was out the door, she grabbed my wrist and her voice dropped into a lower, throaty register. 284 Chauncey Street. I pulled my arm back. What? 284 Chauncey Street, Mercy House. We can help you. Uncle Nikita had half of the bags in the outside cart now. Later that night, he would describe his act of heroism to my mother as she shivered with fever. Because despite everything, sometimes it seemed he wanted her approval. Even beasts long to be loved. True. Help me with what? I asked. She meant business and didn't have much time. She leveled her stare. You don't deserve any of this. You need to get yourself out of this situation as soon as possible. 284 Chauncey Street. It's the one with the angel door knocker. Arrive any time, day or night. You can be safe. Then she turned to the Middle Eastern man behind the counter and nodded. Sorry about the switch, Abdul. I'll bring your cart back tomorrow. Very clever, sister. The next morning, before Uncle Nikita woke, I told my mother what the old woman had said and that I wanted us to leave. She didn't look up from where she diced cooked beets for vinaigrette. She didn't make anything but Russian meals anymore. Not Chinese, and never her hybrid. She replied to me in Mandarin. Oh, thank God they're going to write it in English. I have no work, no friends, and no family. How would I survive? Where would I go? Back to China? Red juice pooled on the cutting board like fresh blood. Oh, she's cutting beets. I thought she hurt herself. Okay. I asked her 4 more times. Let's go to Mercy House. At least listen to what they have to say. But her answer was always the same, and I couldn't imagine leaving her alone with him. If I stayed, at least we had each other. How many people think that the mom's going to die? I can't take this. This is an awful book. I resigned myself to this fate until the day Nikita didn't like the tone I used to tell him dinner was ready, and he put a knife to my throat. Ooh. The steel was cool and sharp against my skin, and his breath was warm and sour. His eyes were crazed, his pupils dilated the way they did when he thrust himself into me. Oh, God. He was getting pleasure from this moment. It pleased him to have his way with my body, to have his way with my life. And that's when I decided I would be more than just beautiful. I would be like the dragon. I told my mother when I left for work at the theater the next day I would not be returning, and I wanted her to come with me, to meet me at Mercy House at 3 o'clock during Nikita's taxi shift. I waited on the front steps of 284 Chauncey Street for 2 hours before I lifted the angel door knocker. Sister Evelyn answered. I'm glad you decided to come, she said, and then she opened the door wider. Welcome home. Worry for my mother filled my stomach, my head, and my mouth. There wasn't room for anything else. It took a week to keep down a proper meal, and twice that before I spoke. I was afraid that if I parted my lips, my mother would spill out. So I kept her in. I stored up my worry and rage until I couldn't hold them in anymore, and they bubbled out of me. No matter how badly I wanted to be like the dragon, it couldn't happen all at once. I'd have to learn. Hope for my mother lives on. Here's the thing about orchids. Even after their last petal drops, they can always bloom again. So maybe I was wrong. Maybe the mom is going to survive this ordeal. We'll have to wait and find out. All right. That's chapter 2, people. I hope you're enjoying this, Marissa, and whoever my new fans are. It's only 18 minutes long. It's half as long as the last night, okay? So I'll see you again another time. I'm doing a read aloud for my 7th graders next week. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep this up. Bye.